Why, God? Why do good things happen to bad people? And why do bad things happen to good people? It just doesn't seem fair. As a pastor over the years, I have seen all kinds of suffering firsthand through the experiences of the people in my care. A father who was killed when debris from a crumbling overpass hit his truck. A family that was torn apart by drug addiction. And a teenager who was missing for months until he was found in the Fox River after the spring thaw. All of us, in our own way, have seen pain in our lives, and we ask, what are we to make of it? From its place in the wisdom literature of the Old Testament, the book of Job tries to make sense of senseless suffering. And it challenges our ideas about the nature of God and the meaning of life. Over the next few weeks in October, we're going to be exploring together the wisdom of Job. And in today's reading, we meet the man named Job. The opening lines of the book that bears his name tell us that Job was honest, a person of absolute integrity. He feared God and avoided evil. Now, you can accept this at face value if you want to, but I think that this is a very unfair description. I don't know a single person who is as pure and as innocent as is claimed about Job. I'm certainly not that way, and none of the people that I know and admire and respect fit that description either. We all have our faults, and none of us here could possibly be as good and as innocent and as righteous as Job supposedly was. The truth is that hardship is just a part of our life, no matter who you are or how good you are. Sometimes we do have a hand in the trouble that comes our way. Sometimes we do make things difficult for ourselves. But other times, bad things just happen because we just happen to be in the way. I'm going to share a story with you, a little video story about a couple and their daughter, Tammy. Let's listen in.
We have a handicapped daughter. Tammy is 28 years old, but the perfect size and development of about a 13-year-old.
Shortly after we got married, we had a new home built. Beck got pregnant with our first daughter, Candy, and life was good, and I felt really in control.
I had Candy first. She was the perfect little girl, smart, cute, just the light of our lives. A pregnancy with Tammy, our second pregnancy, was very normal. Nothing special let us know that anything was going on. We got to the hospital. I thought nothing was wrong. As the labor progressed, Tam's heart rate was dropping. Tam's APGAR score at 1 minute was 0, and her 3-minute APGAR score was like 3, and was in the NICU for about a week before she ended up coming home. Dr. Joshi said that they knew that the potential for damage was there when her heart rate dropped during the delivery, and that we wouldn't know what that damage was until Tam grew up and started exhibiting symptoms. As Tam started growing, her growth was behind. Her growth was delayed. Her development was delayed.
Over that period of time, I know myself, I lost that feeling of control that I had had. It was kind of hard accepting that there was a problem in my family and there was nothing I could do about it. When you think you have an imperfect child, that's a reflection on the parents, and I felt like I was an imperfect parent and I had done something wrong to cause this problem with Tammy. I couldn't understand why God would let this happen in her life, and didn't He understand how it was affecting our whole family?
None of us would blame Becky or Dave for Tammy's disability, and we certainly wouldn't blame Tammy. But you can really hear how Dave struggled with the idea that maybe he did something that could have caused Tammy's disability. As the book of Job explores this very issue of blame, Job represents someone who should not be blamed for his suffering. His innocence is emphasized because part of the biblical tradition, part of it, especially as it's expressed in Deuteronomy, is that you get what you deserve. If you're good and do what's right, then God will bless you. If you're bad and do what's wrong, then God will withhold His blessing or possibly even send a curse. It's not that God is mean, but that He is just, and that there are consequences to our actions. As Karen Jeske told me just this week, when you know better, you do better. But as we see in Job, this idea of getting what you deserve is something that has some big holes in it. You see, Job is innocent. He loves God, and he does what is right. And yet, he is the object of suffering. And as the story goes, perhaps the only reason for Job's suffering, the only reason, is his faithfulness to God. Now, that's going to be kind of an unsettling idea for some of us. For any of us who have committed ourselves to God, who pledge to serve Jesus Christ as our Lord and Savior. There are 4 people in the room today who will be joining Good Samaritan Church, and all of us will be invited to renew our commitment to God. And that very commitment to God is the thing that the adversary pointed to in Job when he asked the Lord for permission to test Job's faith. For reasons of his own, the Lord gave permission. And the adversary set out to do his worst against Job. But notice that the Lord put limits on the adversary. Let's read how God sets the boundary. The Lord answered the adversary, "There he is, within your power, only preserve his life." The adversary went ahead and afflicted Job with a dread disease. There were sores covering him from head to toe. But Job survived this test. His integrity remained intact, and it was even in the midst of his suffering. He remains faithful to God, even though God allowed him to be tested in this way. Now, depending on your perspective, this is good news or it's bad news. I think it's good that God puts limits on the adversary. I think it's good that God has the power over the adversary. I think it's good that God will contain the harm and not allow evil to overwhelm us. But if I am honest, it makes me more than a little uncomfortable that the Lord is the one who gives the adversary permission to cause harm to Job in order to let Job's faith be tested. Now, does that mean that there are times when God is the one who may deserve the blame for our suffering? And if God is to blame, then why should any of us be righteous at all? Why commit yourself to a God who would allow pain and suffering into your life just to test you. We need to ask the question, why serve God? Now, your answer may be determined on how you view faith and religion. One view of religion is utilitarian. In this view, faith is useful inasmuch as it provides certain benefits to human beings. A person with a utilitarian view would serve God not for God's sake, but because there's some reward or blessing to the human, such as good health or more money or inner peace or immortality. Many people have a utilitarian view of faith mainly because they see it as that there's something in it for them. The other view of religion is theocentric. Theo from the word theos, God in Greek, and centric, center. In this second view, faith is focused on not on outcomes for humans, but on serving God and His purposes. Jesus showed us that serving God can cause trouble with your neighbors. It can cause confusion among your friends, and it can land you on a cross. But it was Jesus who said, "All who want to follow me must say no to themselves, take up their cross, and follow me." Now that's theocentric faith. And it's the kind of faith that Job has in mind when he said in verse 10, "Will we receive good from God, but not also receive bad?" The utilitarian view of faith is fine, as long as nothing bad happens. But the thing is, trouble has a way of finding us out. It has a way of stretching utilitarian faith in God beyond the breaking point. When the blessings and the rewards seem in danger, a person who's in it for himself will be tempted to abandon God. On the other hand, when you have theocentric faith and when trouble comes your way, then you don't give up on God just because of what's happening to you. When you serve God for His sake, you realize He didn't design the world so that we would get what we deserve. He made the world for His own purpose and pleasure, not ours. Now, that doesn't mean that God doesn't care about us. It doesn't mean that He's indifferent or callous. It doesn't mean that He's an abuser or a bully of whom we should be afraid. And we really should clarify what the fear of the Lord means. Swiss reformer John Calvin taught that there are two ways to fear God. Most people fear the Lord because they don't want Him to punish them for their sins. And when I was younger and did something that my parents told me not to do, I knew that there was going to be some punishment delivered to me, and I was afraid of that punishment. And John Calvin described that fear as servile fear. This type of fear says a lot more about us and our guilt, our shame, than it says about God. But according to Calvin, the other way of fearing the Lord is out of reverence and respect. It is a fear of offending God, who is worthy of our best. And this type of fear says more about God than it does about us. We are meant to serve the Lord, not the other way around. And so it's all about finding our proper place in God's creation. In fact, keeping things in perspective is key when trying to make sense of suffering.
For me, it's gotten much easier to trust God with the things that are going on in my life because I've seen Him take care of my life. And I think for me, that makes it easier for the things that have come since then. Tam's had issues. They thought she had cancer. They thought she had cerebral palsy. Through all of that, we pretty much knew God was in control. He was going to handle it, and He was going to give us the grace to handle it as we needed to.
Just having Tammy in your life every day, she is such a caring, loving person. She has taught everybody in our family how to care and love other people and how not to be judgmental. She is the most non-judgmental person I've ever met. Even though we have difficult days and difficult tasks that we have to deal with, She has definitely been a very large blessing in our lives and in our family.
Clearly, Dave and Becky would never have chosen a handicap for their daughter, but they have learned to see God's blessing even through their daughter's handicap. In fact, it has changed their view of God and themselves. The same thing happened to Bethany Hamilton, who was born in Hawaii. She loved surfing, and I think she was practically born in the water. She became a champion in national surfing competitions. But her life and her love of surfing took an unexpected turn when she was attacked by a 14-foot tiger shark. She survived the shark attack, but she lost one of her arms. And you can imagine how hard that would have been for a surfer. That terrible loss caused Bethany to look deep within. There's a scene from the film Soul Surfer that's based on her story. Bethany's father helped her to step back and to see that although she had lost an arm, she had not lost everything. And he encouraged her not only to step back and to put things into perspective, but to take the time in order to know what to do next. He said, until you know what to do, you pray. You pray and listen. Now that's an open-ended proposition. There are no guaranteed results. But I think it is the best advice that there is for making sense out of suffering. Pray. Pray and listen. Someone I know, when he was in the middle of a crisis, said, God doesn't owe me anything. And I think that's the real test, isn't it? Do you serve God believing that he owes you something? Or are you willing to serve the Lord for God's sake? Ask yourself, which way do you lean? One of the ways you can tell is in your prayers. When your prayers are a laundry list of all the things you want God to do for you, when your happiness depends on things going your way, when you find good fortune and you think that it's an answer to prayer, then I suspect you probably lean in the direction of believing that God owes you something. On the other hand, when you can pray without making any request of God, when you can join Job in the ash heap and sit in silence, then you probably lean toward trusting the Lord and serving him no matter what. And when trouble comes, you know that the best thing for you to do, the best way to keep things in perspective, the best way to find your place in God's creation is to pray. Pray and listen for what comes next.